Okay, so I promised that I would talk more about the Canadian division and this unfair generalization they've been getting this whole season. It's still going on because when the season started in the early weeks of the season, the complaint was there were high scoring games. The complaint was, wow, the goaltending in the Canadian division sucks. Yet who won the Vezina Trophy last year? Connor Hellebuck, Winnipeg Jets. They also have Carey Price, but okay. Of course, this year has seen the Toronto Maple Leafs lead that division pretty much all year. They've been kicking ass, and now we get to the root of this whole thing. The people saying, "Wow, the only reason why Toronto's in first place because the Canadian teams suck." I mean, it's easy. It's easy when Ottawa's in there. You play them all the time, even though Ottawa is not an easy team as the Leafs and especially the Flames, who've lost, the latter of whom lost to Ottawa 5 times this season. And B, clearly the worst team in the NHL this year is Buffalo. Yet you have East Division fans saying this, saying, "Well, Ottawa sucks. Everybody can beat them." Yeah, but Buffalo. Yeah. In short, people are just spitting on the North Division, the Canadian Division, like it's the worst division in the league. It is not. The Canadian Division is not the NFC East. Okay, it is not the NHL's equivalent of the NFC East. So stop talking about them like they are. Okay, and there's also this sentiment that it's the Leafs, then there's everybody else. While I do think the Leafs are the best team in Canada, and I have thought that for years, they haven't held that position by accident or because nobody else is competitive. Canadian teams have been competitive for forever, and dating back to the 2011-12 season. I did my homework, of course, not some, but I do maintain it by memory. But dating back to the 2011-12 season, it's been evident that Canada's teams are all pretty good. Why am I starting with the 2011-12 season? Because that was the year that the Atlanta Thrashers moved to Winnipeg and became Jets 2.0. So these seven Canadian teams have coexisted since then. This is the 10th season. Hard to believe, isn't it? 10 years. Okay, so I did my homework. I did my homework on this, and here it is from 2011-12 up to last season. Who's the best team in Canada, record wise? Well, let's start with the 11-12 season. And that year, it was the Canucks. The Canucks were not only the best team in Canada, they were the best team in the league. They won the President's Trophy that year. But that was the year they embarrassed themselves by only winning one game. Of course, we all know what would happen with another President's Trophy year team 7 years later. But yeah, Vancouver won the President's Trophy 111 points. They and the Senators made the playoffs this year. Senators had 92 points. 12-13, that was the shortened season. Montreal had the best record among Canadian teams with 63 points, 14, and 5. Not a bad record that year. The Canucks, Toronto, and Ottawa made the playoffs. That's 4 out of 7. 13-14. This was easy. The Canadians were the best team again in Canada. That's because they were the only team that made the playoffs that year. They had a 100-point season. They made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. That's where the Rangers beat them. 14-15, again, it was the Canadians. They improved by 10 points, had 110 points. But they actually had company from Canadian teams in the playoffs. It was them, the Canucks, the Flames, the Senators, and the Jets all made it. However, 15-16, that was the year that no Canadian teams made it. The All-American playoffs. The best team in Canada that year was the Senators. They were 38, 35, and 9, had 86 points, but fell, I think it was about 4 points out of a spot. So, but they were the best team in Canada. 16-17, the Canadians and Oilers tied with the exact same record, 47, 26, and 9, 103 points, tied for the best record among Canadian teams. There were high point totals for Canadian teams that year. Senators had 98. Maple Leafs had 95. The Flames had 94. All five made the playoffs, and that was the year 16-17 that the Senators came within this close, came within inches of making the Stanley Cup final. The East Conference final against the Penguins went to Game 7. Game 7 went to double overtime, but that one shot by Kunitz, that was the difference. 17-18, the Jets held the position as the best team in Canada. 114 points, 52 wins. The Maple Leafs that year had 105. They kicked ass, and those two teams made the playoffs. The Jets, obviously, the Jets did the better of the two. They went to the Western Conference Final that year. Of course, that was the year they finally won a playoff game. Remember, these Jets are tied to the Thrashers, and that team hadn't won a playoff game, let alone a series in their history. But they went all the way to the conference final, where they were beaten by the expansion Golden Knights during that crazy run. 18-19. The Flames were the best team in Canada. They won 50 games, had 107 points. They were the number one team in the West, but they got beat by these guys. The Jets and the Leafs all made the playoffs. Jets had another 100. Jets finished with 99. Maple Leafs had another 100-point season, but none of those three made it past round one, unfortunately. Last season, 1920, the season that was halted due to the pandemic. The pause started in around the second week of March. And some teams ended up playing more games than others, so they went by point percentage. And out of the 7 Canadian teams, the highest point percentage among Canadian teams was .585. That was the Oilers. They finished just ahead of the Leafs, who were .579. Now, and of course, the playoffs were modified. 24 teams. Only Ottawa. Ottawa was the only Canadian team that didn't participate in the bubble playoffs. 6 Canadian teams participated, but all had to play in the qualifying round, and none of them got past round 1 of the 16-team playoffs. So, to those saying, well, of course Toronto's in first place because all the other Canadian teams suck. This is the 10th season. That these 7 Canadian teams have coexisted. This is the first time that Toronto's been on top of all the Canadian teams. First time. Before that, they had never been the best. They had never had the best record among Canadian teams in the 9 previous seasons that played. In the 9 previous seasons, Montreal had it 4 times. Edmonton twice, though they shared it 1 year. Calgary once, Ottawa once, Vancouver once, Winnipeg once. Toronto. This is the first time in this 10-season span that Toronto has had the best record among Canadian teams. Yet there are no good teams in Canada other than them. The competition among Canadian teams, it's deep. It's gritty. It's just there's a lot of depth there. There are good teams in Canada, but people can't seem to see that for some reason. They see Ottawa. Well, Ottawa's the worst team in the league. First off, that's Buffalo. Secondly, Ottawa only sucks in the standings. They're in the bottom of that division only because they can't win enough games. But on the ice, that's a different story. They play. Ask Toronto how difficult it is for playing the Senators. We all saw the last time the Battle of Ontario took place, 6-5. Jack Campbell barely survived, 6-5. And of course, we all know about another game they played, but let's not dwell on that. And they just beat Winnipeg. Yesterday. They just beat the Jets. So tell me the story again on how the Senators are the worst team in the league. When Buffalo, it took them about a month to get another win. 18 straight losses. That ties a record. But yeah, Ottawa's the worst team in the league. Yeah, okay. Sure they are. Buffalo, the Sabres were the last team to get the 10 wins. But Ottawa, yeah. My goodness. My goodness. As I've said before, I said this before on Twitter and on these videos. It is time to put respect on that Canadian division. It really is. And though, and people it's they say it's anti-Canada bias. I think it's anti-Leafs bias too, because the Leafs are the most. The Leafs are not a well-liked team in Canada. They're like the Yankees in Canada, and uh, I don't know. I don't know. There's always people that want to put a negative spin on anything good that the Leafs are doing. Even Leafs fans do this. Leafs fans. That's a result of the Leafs having gone so long without a Stanley Cup. They can't help but be cynical. Well, Leafs fans are like, well, we're doing well, but when's the other shoe going to drop? You know, there's that mentality. Um, and even they're kind of buying into, well, it's just the Canadian division, and how the Leafs going to do when they if slash when they reach round three, because the first two rounds are all divisional. It's like those old days between 80, I think it was 80, 81 or 82 and 93, when the first two rounds of playoffs were purely divisional. That's what it's going to be this year. Toronto, if they, well, I say Toronto, but I think Toronto's going to win that tournament, that North Division tournament. Whoever wins that North Division tournament will play an American team for the first time all year. And that's what the doubt's based on, because look, you got the East, the Central, the West. The sentiment is the East. Well, we don't know who's going to come out of the East. The Central is between Tampa, Florida, and Carolina. I think the consensus mostly says Tampa's going to emerge that division. The West is between Colorado and Vegas, and Canadian division doubters are pretty much saying, well, whoever wins the Canadian division, they're going to get killed in the Cup semifinal. And that's, I don't know, we really don't know if that's true, because the Cup semifinalists will be seeded by record, by point total. So we don't know who's going to play who. But it's going to be interesting. But anyway, as I said, put some respect on that Canadian division. It's a deep division. Toronto's good. Winnipeg's good. Edmonton's good, even though for the most part they're basically Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, but that team is pretty good when they can be. Montreal's good, even though they've racked up a lot of overtime shootout losses this season. But Montreal is pretty good. Really, the only bad team. There's only one. There's only one really bad team in that division. That's Ottawa. An argument can be said for Vancouver, but they try. Calgary, they kind of try too, but they kind of stumble over themselves. But they do pull out wins when they need to. They have beaten Toronto a few times, and so yeah, it's time to respect the Canadian division. It's a good division. It's a deep division. It's not the NFC. It's not the NFC East of hockey. Stop talking about it like it is. So that's my 2 cents about the Canadian division, and of course I'll be back to recap this past week's action this Sunday.